All right, so let's get started. Everyone, thank you for joining. Just a few housekeeping items for those of you who are just coming on. If at any time you have a question, use the chat function and go to webinar and let us know what you're thinking. You can even tell us that you disagree or tell us that we're wrong, and we'd be happy to discuss and or correct. It's all about learning continually. If you have any questions, again, at any point during the webinar, we don't want you to forget your question. Enter it in the chat, and we'll get to it towards the end. We will be giving out the $10 Visa gift cards. They'll be delivered via email for those of you that attend and stay towards the through to the end, and you'll get that within a week. And then we'll be announcing the winner of the Amazon Echo, which we already talked about. Fun little device, doesn't like your slang, at least not Ted's slang. So with that, I'll hand it over to Marty to get us started.
Hey everybody, my name is Martin Opsahl. I work for a company called Triangular Solutions here in Houston, Texas, and we are a cloud/hosted managed service provider. We partnered up with Infoscale because we feel that they are a best-of-breed product in the space of disaster recovery as a service and backup as a service. It's definitely an excellent product. It's easy to use, easy to license, and just easy to manage, and that's kind of what we're building our business around, is they're providing the best possible platform for our customers, so we can provide the best level customer experience for them, and also providing that one-stop shop for that IT as a service, everything from hosted phones to Exchange to disaster recovery as a service, backup as a service, etc. Our goal, obviously, is not to take away anybody's IT environment, it's just to augment what they already have, to try and add some value. Maybe free some time up and let some of the strategic IT resources be truly that, be strategic for the business rather than running around putting out fires, which I know a lot of IT people, that's a lot of times it's the nature of the game. Well, if we can hand some of that off at an affordable rate and let somebody manage some of those services, and ideally the IT department could be more valuable to the company and the company can be more successful. So that's kind of our goal. That's kind of us in a nutshell. We're fairly new in Houston. We've been around for just under a year. We have really strong partnerships here in town, though, obviously with Infoscale and some other cloud service providers and other big name manufacturers like HP, Dell, etc. So if anybody has any questions, we'll have our contact information at the end. You feel free to reach out to me directly, or we can go through Derek over at Infoscale as well, and just make sure your questions are answered. Thanks very much.
Terrific. And Infoscale is very happy to partner with Martin and his company. Their goals align very much with what we would like to see out of our partners and the services that they can provide, and the expertise that they have will undoubtedly result in more customer experiences where, whether it's hardware failure, natural disaster, or ransomware, there's going to be a minimal experience of downtime, and you're going to be able to get everything back and running. What Infoscale does, Infoscale builds a platform based on backup and disaster recovery. We've been around since 2011 under the brand of Infoscale, which is when we separated from building an online backup service that was used by individuals as well as some micro businesses, and then we really wanted to expand into business continuity services for the SMB market. Our goal has always been to take what is traditionally unreachable from a budgetary standpoint and bring it down to the SMB market. When we look at the the economy, I don't think anyone argues that the SMBs are what really drive most of the employment and most of the productivity in the country. And the lack of affordable options to keep those businesses running in cases of downtime that we know will happen, we thought was a major problem. And so, being a cloud software developer, we spent all of our time building a solution built for the SMB up to SME market. So this is something that enterprises used to pay for hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, and now SMBs can have at the cost of what a traditional tape backup system might have cost, and still be more effective and probably a little cheaper when you calculate in management and monitoring. Some of our validation, if you haven't heard of us and wondering where we came from, we've been ranked by Gartner as a leading visionary in the disaster recovery space in 2016, and we're looking forward to the results of 2017 in the next few weeks here. For Gartner language, visionary isn't the same as what you would expect in common vernacular. It means that we're not just dreamers. It means that we actually have a vision of disrupting the market, which we do by, bringing it down to the SMB area by leveraging the cloud, but we've actually been executing on it. And we've been quite successful on it, successful enough to be named a leading visionary. For our cloud backup service, we have many awards, PC Mag Editor's Choice 6 times. We've mentioned in 2015 as a cool vendor for cloud backup services for our speed and robustness in terms of version history, simplicity, and being able to protect anything from an individual's machine to dropping it across Active Directory and getting an entire laptop fleet, or even users that are disconnected. So it makes it manageable for techs like Martin and his team to manage all your devices and not leave any exposed. And our mission is pretty simple: eradicate downtime and data loss. And these are two big items. The reason we focus on downtime is because downtime is a very costly event for any business. Being out of operation, whether it's just a single employee or a group of employees or the entire business, can be quite expensive. Most businesses today may not even have a figure to point to say this is how much downtime costs. I guess we'll kind of ask, does anyone know? We have a poll coming up. But it's really not that difficult of a figure to come up with, and it's the basis for everything you do from here on, right? So it's kind of like buying a flight and then buying the flight insurance. If you have a budget airline and you paid $80 for the ticket, you're not going to pay $70 for flight insurance. If something goes wrong, you'll just pay $80 at the time for a second ticket. If you have a ticket that's a couple $1,000s, then you're absolutely going to pay that $70 or $100 insurance fee because it makes sense. And the same thing with downtime. If you're not aware of how much it costs, it's hard to justify what you're going to do to prevent it. The second part of that is understanding the causes. You have a lot of technology out there in the market today, all kind of talking about the same stuff. And it'll be nearly impossible for you to evaluate a full solution versus a partial strategy if you don't understand all of the differences. And again, this is where Martin and his team will come in and really guide you through what you need based on how your business operates and works from a day-to-day basis and even long-term. Traditionally, hardware failure, human error, and software failure have been the prime items that you're dealing with. Unfortunately, the market named itself disaster recovery because from a IT perspective, if you have hardware failure or RAID degrade, something where the business is down, that's a disaster for the IT team and for the business. Most people hear they hear disaster recovery and they think fire, floods, hurricanes. For those of you in the region, like Houston, of course, that speaks volumes to you, but not everyone's going to be affected the same way by natural disasters. And statistically, it's not the biggest thing on your list. Statistically, it's these micro disasters. You have some drives fail. We know hardware fails because there are warranties. Why are warranties designed? Because the manufacturer says, we can't afford to support the rate of failure after this amount of time passes. And that's based on testing. That's not random. They pick it out of a hat. It's not a conspiracy to sell you more. It's simply the longevity of the hardware they've sold you. And humans make mistakes all day long. You just have to hope that the mistakes are small enough where they don't make a big mess, which they do. But they happen so frequently they add up. It's the second biggest cause of downtime that we have on our list here. So I'm going to launch a quick poll here and just get a feel for if you have any idea about downtime. For the most part, we don't want you feeling bad about this. For the most part, I've found businesses that are really in kind of the enterprise market, 1,000 employees, doing hundreds of million a year, still don't have a good idea or formally assessed downtime risk. That's huge. Even right now, I'm seeing pretty consistent information, pretty evenly split between no, but I know it's bad, and then the ones that have maybe looked into it a little bit, which is rough idea, but it's not formal. And we do have a handful of yes, we know, and that's why we're here. So we'll be happy to talk with you all after. So So there we go. I'll go ahead and share that with you all so you can see the results. Look at that, 43%, 43% A and B, and then 14% C. Okay, so let's get into really what we're talking about, which is ransomware. Of course, the solution is going to cover everything. The reason we're focusing on ransomware is because this is the first new issue that technologists have had to face in 30 years. And it's not paying the ransom. Paying out a couple grand is not that big of a deal. Being inoperable for 5 days, 10 days is a big deal. And that's what we're here to talk about. Ransomware today. So what are the, by the numbers, and these are numbers from 2016. So, 2017's just begun. From 2016, and really this is by September of 2016, $1 billion US were collected in ransom payments. That's from January to September. So not even a full year, 1 billion. Now, in 2015, the figure was closer to 20 million. So that's a huge increase. One of the reasons is because of the way that it gets spread via phishing. Phishing since the early 2000s has been the most successful way to spread malware because it bypasses most security solutions that are out there. The user invites you into the system a bit like a vampire, right? Invite me into your home. Once that happens, bad things start to happen with ransomware. It's no longer just going to individual machines like it did in 2015. It's targeting critical applications on your network, including your backups. When you get infected, you really only have two options. You pay out the ransom, or you're able to restore from a backup system you have. Depending on the variant of ransomware, just because you pay, let's say you have a Bitcoin account set up and you put some money in there just in case this happens, which is not a terrible idea. Better would be just to have a good backup system in place. But let's say you do that. Even if you pay right away, it could still take you a couple days just to go through the decryption process. It's not a magical press the button and then all of a sudden you're back up and running. Some variants make you go file by file. It really depends on what you're working with. And because ransomware has become so successful, there's been a huge cyber criminal market rush to enter this market, right? So it's a bit like any other market boom. Somebody starts making a lot of money, then everyone else wants to join in and get a piece. Right now, it's estimated that 95% of all phishing contains ransomware. And that's why, again, we're talking about it today, is because this, more than any other case we've seen before, is absolutely a case of when, not if, you get hit by ransomware. About 1 in 3 people get hit by phishing attacks. 1 in 3 businesses, right? Because they enter through people. So you have to look into your systems. Now the steps to recover can seem simple when we just list it out. Isolate the problem, figure out when the infection occurred, and then roll back from a previous backup. Sounds cheery. And it can be if you have, again, the right tools in place. But again, if you don't know what you're dealing with, it'll be hard to build a defense for an offense you've never seen before. And that's what we're going to talk about, is let's talk about the offense. So how does ransomware eliminate your backup plan? I boiled this down into five major categories that are important to understand when it comes to building up your defense against ransomware. And there's no case of pulling an Atlanta Falcons in this case. If you're prepared, you're prepared. So first, lone wolf myth. The lone wolf myth really speaks to underestimating what it is we're facing. Part of this is perpetrated by how it's covered. Ransomware has become such a big thing that we're getting general news networks covering it. And because it's not something they cover often, because it's not tech news, they sometimes can mislead what's happening. So for instance, with the Bay Area Rapid Transit System getting hit by ransomware a couple months ago, that's known as BART. It's in San Francisco. It runs throughout the whole Bay Area. It's a big city, has a lot of commuters coming in and out. It was a big deal. When you describe that as being hacked, most people think of some basement dweller, no windows, sitting there on their machine, physically typing away, hacking through the machine. Think Swordfish, all those monitors and fun stuff and awkward celebrations. That's not how it works. These are full functioning businesses. They operate like you and I do. They have revenue targets. They have campaign evaluations to see which campaigns are more successful than others. They set up personas of who they're targeting to be as victims. We call our victims customers, and it's a happy relationship. They're setting up target personas to victimize people. And they can do this through a lot of publicly available information. Even without the leaked database of all the LinkedIn and Yahoo information, all that information can be searched. A lot of people use it for good marketing. They use it for finding out who works where, and then they may set up campaigns to specific business types. One example of this that really proves what we're saying, and that these are not lone wolves, and it's not an individual hacker for each instance or a team, it's software. And that means that they can attack many people at the same time, and they do. This variant's called Spora. And one thing you'll notice about the screenshot up here on the screen is, first, it looks quite pretty, right? This is a nice looking UI. It has a bit of a native Mac OS look to it with the big icons. Probably works really well on an iPad. The other thing you'll notice is on the right side here, this is actually a live chat to technical support for the ransomware. So if you're having trouble setting up a Bitcoin account, you're not sure where to go, you're having trouble decrypting the files once they give you the encryption key, they're there to help you. Again, these are professionals. They're just on the other side of the law than the rest of us. But it benefits them that when they get paid, you get your data back. Because if people don't get their data back, then everyone's going to stop paying and the whole market collapses. To further the point, because there are a lot of juniors in the market, there have been a lot of reports of people paying out and only getting some of their data back or none of it. Usually the cause is not that they weren't actually given the encryption keys. The cause is generally that these juniors have junior code, and it accidentally, and completely unintentional, corrupts the files that it's encrypting. That's a big deal, especially when you're talking about, law enforcement or legal. If it really brings up doubt to the admissibility of the information you have for a case you're working, if ransomware hits you, because you can't prove absolutely that the data wasn't manipulated. You can prove that it wasn't manipulated if you recover from a backup that has, a hash algorithm that's recognized like ours. But they actually give you 2 file restores for free just to test to make sure that it will actually work. This is, you really appreciate this level of criminal activity. You hope that if you get hit by ransomware, you get hit by one of the professional organizations and not one of the juniors. But this is just a sign of things to come. They've actually built this out to be delivered as a service. So they're going to rebrand Spora in other names in other countries, and we're going to start seeing this go to other people. So they're actually selling their ransomware software just like other software companies would sell and rebrand to other providers. When we're talking about targeting your business, a lot of people think, well, my business, why would somebody target us? We're not that big. Again, it's not a human, it's software, it's automated. So there's no, whether they're targeting, a 2-man shop or a 5-man shop or a 10-man shop, it makes no effort difference. They're going to get some money from you for the same amount of effort. The same way that they targeted hospitals and still target hospitals, it's the same amount of effort to get money from them as it is from you. The reason they go after SMBs is because SMBs are notorious for not being well prepared or equipped for disaster recovery or backups. And that's because SMBs are often kind of on that fine line of you're running really lean, really fast. Everyone's wearing a couple of hats, and there's not a lot of people who can dedicate themselves to one particular item. And that's also the rise of going out to companies like Triangulum and saying, look, we really need somebody who's going to have our back from the technical part of our business, make sure we're running effectively, efficiently, and also protected from things like this. And that's when you can actually get set up and protected. As far as industry by industry, industrial services, medical facilities, financial, government agencies, but really they're kind of all over the board. But they're looking at all of these factors when they're setting up your persona. And again, this is something that Triangulum can help you identify if you give them a call after this presentation, and we can discuss, what you have in your network, how your business operates, and we can determine if you're prepared. The other big thing is, when they go to a business, it changes the way that ransomware proliferates across a network. They're looking at not just entering through the end user, but entering through the end user and then spreading to other users in the network until they finally find a hole in whether it's an operating system, hardware, or some sort of exploit where they can get domain access. And once they have domain access, that's when they can start getting your critical systems. Now, the critical systems, a lot of people will also assume that this is somewhat by chance. It's absolutely not. That's not the way software works. There's not a bunch of wildcards where they just say, encrypt whatever you see first. It's more targeted than that. They're looking specifically for very common types of databases like SQL, which is the second, third, and fourth most common database in the world. This is typically going to be your customer database. Wherever you're keeping your orders, your finances, customer information, your support system, whatever it is, it's probably running on some sort of SQL database, MySQL, SQLite, whatever it is. But they're looking at SQL and others. They're also looking at your backups. Again, these are professionals, and they know that your ability to recover is in exact competition with their goal of collecting money from you. And identifying backups is pretty easy because everyone on Windows pretty much uses Volume Shadow Service, VSS, to run backups of open files. It's what allows us to work on files that are currently open. So Infrascale is no different. We use VSS to write backups as well. But the difference is, where are you storing your backups? Are they just stored on a network location that is available to your admin? If your admin can go into the storage partition where your backups are being stored, so can ransomware. And what it's doing is it's actually encrypting your backup files themselves. So, before, the discussion about viruses and backups were, well, if we have a virus on my machine and I back up and I recover the file, am I going to recover the virus? The answer would be yes. Make sure that you have a virus scanner in your machine when you download files, or download it to another location first. The situation that we're talking about now is you don't even have the option to recover to see if it's infected because the file is just locked. So you're just completely out of pocket. And then you're only given one option, pay out the ransom. So to explain what this means a little more, bit of an animation here. Here we have Mr. Ransomware, the skull and crossbones, and Mr. User. Mr. User gets infected, likely by some phishing attack, but there are other ways to get malware in your machine, drive-by downloads, maybe social phishing, LinkedIn messages with attachments, things like this, Skype. Mr. User gets attacked. In 2015, the ransomware would start encrypting his files in the background, or her files, usually starting with the oldest files first. And that's because if you haven't changed a file in 3 months, statistically, you're unlikely to ever open that file again. And then once it gets to your recent files, either you activate or it finishes, and then you get this notice. And you're given, 12 days to recover, or they're going to get rid of your encryption key. The new way of going about it in 2016 was that they get in your machine, and then they start looking at what you're connected to and looking at who you're connected to. They spread to the other users, and again, they're looking for any vulnerabilities or even loose policies. We run into this with police agencies, of which we're the exclusive option for police agencies in the United States because we're the only CGIS or CGIS certified cloud backup and DR provider in the U.S., at least currently. But a lot of police agencies, you'll have high-ranking officers demand full access to different parts of the system because of their officer status, not necessarily because of their technical status. And this poses a huge problem in security when you're talking about things that spread this way. So not having tight controls over user access, or just simply vulnerabilities that you can do nothing about. Windows vulnerabilities, SQL vulnerabilities, IIS, etc. They get to your critical applications and backups, and as soon as they do, they encrypt very quickly because there's no reason not to, right? as soon as they encrypt your backups in your applications, they got you right where they want you. Hopefully you have some off-site backups, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to avoid paying the ransom in that case. Which goes right into what we're talking about, is the only way to avoid the new variants, which is becoming pretty much a standard practice of targeting backups, is to have an off-site backup. So you can either have a direct-to-cloud backup like Infrascale Cloud Backup does, or you can have our disaster recovery appliance, which sits on your machine or sits on your network, and then it'll replicate off-site. Now, the other advantage of the way that we've built our appliance is that it's not accessible to the network admin. So you would still, if you get hit by ransomware that's targeting network backups, it's not going to find ours. And even if it found where we are storing backups, it won't have access to get there. So they're completely locked out. And that's because it's sitting on a proprietary file system that we've built for dedupe and compression to make things work very quickly for replication and restore, and also to make the use of the appliance as efficient as possible. When you look at other services, you find a lot of services out there that will white label different technologies and then package it into what looks like an appliance. They even send it to you. It has their name on it. But the partition that's storing the backup files is open up to the network admin. The network admin can browse to it, look through it, see there's a full backup, there's an incremental. So can the ransomware. Now, hopefully, those services, and a lot of them do, will replicate off-site to usually a dedicated VM just for you. But not a lot of people have the extensive cloud infrastructure that we've built, which is purpose-built for speed. And speed of recovery is absolutely critical when we're talking about downtime. Backup systems and disaster recovery systems have different objectives. They're both important, and you should have them. One of the things that's important to understand about downtime is, of course, your cost. And again, the graph I've put up here was built with, an SMB profile, making 11 million in revenue per year with a 30% margin. And from there, we can calculate our opportunity cost, which is, revenue generated per hour. It's 2,080 hours per work year. And then their operating expense, which is 30% of that. And then you put those together and you have your downtime ticker costs. 3 to 5 business days of being down is kind of the danger zone, which is what the highlighted red box is here. Statistically, 80% of businesses that experience downtime for 3 to 5 business days and are unable to recover all of their data after that point do not last 12 months. And the reason is because downtime is one of those things that affects so many different parts of your business and your customers that it's not an all-at-once issue, right? So it's something that will compound and compound. That customer you used to get references from, now you have a complaint on your website. So if your business is based on a lot of word of mouth, and then your customers are affected by your inability to deliver products because you were hit by something like this, that's bad. That's one of the reasons that a lot of people don't report their ransomware incidents. They're worried about the customer backlash of people knowing that they were hit. Fortunately, ransomware has become such a big deal. Most organizations are realizing that we're all in this together. We're all trying to combat this, and the only way that we can is if we pool our information and work together on solutions to get out of it. Fortunately, everyone pretty much agrees that having a good backup and recovery plan is your only guarantee to be okay in this situation. And then I have this timeline of, we have a backup system on the top and a disaster recovery system on the bottom, and it kind of explains the steps and the time that it goes through to get a business back up and running with these two different types of services. I want to hand it back over to Marty to kind of fill us in and talk about the difference of working with one versus the other, so you can better understand what it is we're talking about.
Well, really the big difference is disaster recovery is its name, disaster recovery. So it's the point where you can recover your data that's not on site, so you're meeting regulatory and compliance and other things you need to speak to within the business, so you're covered, if you will. You kind of do those check boxes, but the reality is even though those check boxes are there, the goal for your backups is to be able to recover that data. So if it's in the cloud, you got to suck it back down out of the cloud, store it locally if your servers are optional. If they're working, you can clean those out, get them up and running. So obviously the process is fairly more extensive, especially if your data is in the cloud. You have to pull it down the cloud. If it's locally cached somewhere, that gives you some more options. Makes things a little bit faster, but the disaster recovery as a service is where the server's already in the cloud. The data is already in the cloud. You basically just turn them up. You hit the easy button, get them spun up, and get your employees working again within a matter of minutes, versus compared to hours or possibly days, even with a good disaster recovery plan. If you're not calculating having that data sped up somewhere, whether it's in a private cloud or a public cloud environment, then it's just going to take you longer.
Exactly. And one of the big differences when we talk about InfraScale being a cloud software development company first, and the way that we leverage the cloud really shows up when you go into a recovery scenario. When you have just a backup versus a disaster recovery solution, any recovery, the first thing you need to be able to do first before you recover data is have a place to recover it, right? So that's why step 4 here is just rebuild the server. That's anything from hardware to operating system, right? Then you're going to need to reconfigure any services that you have running, and then you'll be able to try to restore from a backup. So by this point, you're already hours deep into the recovery time. With the disaster recovery service, you would have already been re-networked and running from the cloud. And Martin's technical team, they would have been, okay, we got everything running back from the cloud. Let's get everything rebuilt on site in production. And the importance of this difference in steps as far as uptime first, production and recovery second, is that a lot of times when downtime occurs, because it's so impactful, the technicians are often rushed to get things done the fast way rather than the right way. And Martin, you can chime in here too, but oftentimes doing it the fast way first and then you make some notes of how to go back and fix it later rarely happen, or they cause additional issues because you did it the fast way, not the right way. And so you may end up with maybe underpowered hardware because you took what was available, or you have a configuration that's done in kind of a, I'll use a technical term, jinky way, rather than the proper way. Marty, you've been through this before, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think, so our approach to it is we go in and we talk to our clients and we try to understand not only what the issue is, what the problem we're trying to solve for, but obviously what the budget is. And if everybody had, unlimited budgets, they could spend all the money that they wanted to spend, then we wouldn't be having this conversation because everybody would have perfect environments, right? To be, have hot sites on either side and everything would be good to go. But the reality, everybody does have a budget. So we try to get our customers, if you're not doing any backups at all, you don't have any offsite backups, then our first goal is to create that. So we do have the backup as a service, which is the first step towards disaster recovery as a service. And we try to build into the disaster recovery piece to show the value there. So there's, from a budgetary standpoint, if all you can afford is to have backups in the cloud, then absolutely, you need to have, at a minimum, have backups offsite. And again, we'll kind of work you into the disaster recovery piece. Now, kind of what Derek was saying a moment ago is there's two ways to look at it. There's the reactive way and there's the proactive way. Proactive way is having a plan up front, knowing what your limitations are, knowing what kind of risks you're dealing with, and having a plan to resolve for those. Whereas reactive is not really fully defining what the recovery plan is, regardless whether you do backup as a service or full disaster recovery as a service, understanding what that plan is and having it spelled out so you know how to respond accordingly. And that proactive approach is going to offer you shorter downtime, less lost data. It's just going to make you look like a hero instead of, having to struggle with recovering data from a tape or some other means.
Hero instead of a zero, right? So we're going to another poll real quickly. Based on what we talked about, do you know that somebody is testing your backups regularly and that there's a known recovery plan so that during the recovery process, as Martin had pointed out, that there is no discovery of how to recover things or how to reconnect things? Do you feel that this is prepared? And do you know absolutely? And if those of you have IT staff that are supposed to be taking care of this, but you actually haven't seen a recovery report, I would choose B. So close but no cigar. But this is something that you should be getting on a regular basis is, hey, we did a test of all of our systems. And this was the time it took us to recover, and we ran into these issues and were able to resolve them the next time. That's the type of service that you're going to expect when you move over to Triangulum.
That is probably one of the biggest things that we see, really, is that I see a lot of customers in the SMB mid-market space that they have the best intentions in the world. They put together these plans, and some of them have nice little binders and everything spelled out, but they never go back and they test the plan. And never go test it back and just make sure they're recoverable, that they can test their databases, make sure they're mountable, et cetera. So if you're not testing that plan on a regular basis, you are leaving yourself exposed. And I had a client here in town that their ERP system went down, and they had 2 weeks for their backups, and the backup application had gotten infected somehow, and all their backups for all 2 weeks were dead. They couldn't recover around any of them, and there was an ERP system that went down, and it was almost catastrophic for the company. They called us to help them recover, and we're working on the proposal for them right now. But that's the risk. Even if you're doing your backups, you feel like you're doing everything right. If you're not testing the backups to make sure that data is available and that you can, recover the business from it, then at least start there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And especially any of you on the line, you can give us a chat, yes or no. If you're using tape backup systems, those are notorious for being very slow in the recovery. And because of how slow they are, it's very expensive to run test recoveries because of the number of man hours that goes into it. And you have to be on site. So it's a very expensive endeavor. So if anyone's using tape today, definitely give us a call. The odds are that if you think tape is cheap, you're not looking at the operational expenses in addition to capital. But this is something that you're going to get better coverage for generally less money. We've seen about a 60% savings if you combine capital and operational expenses in that. So I'm sharing the poll right now. It looks like 57% are close but no cigar, 29% just not prepared, and then 14% are feeling pretty good. So that's good. Good on you, 14%. I have this quote here. If you look at any analyst, whether it's Gartner and their analysis of how to prepare for ransomware, or the quote I have from Bruce Schneier, who's a well-renowned security guru, is backup strategy. And when we say backup strategy, we of course include the recovery part of that. But really, that's why we're promoting this. That's why Triangulum leads with, as a baseline service, because it actually hurts Triangulum if you're not set up well, right? They're going to spend a ton of hours trying to fix a situation if you aren't properly prepared, and the next thing they're going to do is get you in a good situation. Even if you just take in your computer to Best Buy or something like this, the first thing everyone does before they start working on a machine is run a backup of it. And that's because it's the basic fundamental part of computing today and the way to keep yourself safe. With disaster recovery, InfraScale, we actually guarantee that we can boot any machine in the cloud in 15 minutes or less, and at a fraction of the cost of systems that can't even do that. We actually track boot times globally across all of our customers, at least the ones that are connected. We do have some government agencies that run in a disconnected manner, but the ones that are connected, we're actually seeing boot times of 1 minute, 2 minutes at most. So that is a real SLA. When it comes to DR, a lot of people avoid the topic because it sounds expensive. And traditionally, it was. And by traditional, I mean 2 years ago, right? Technology moves quickly. So in the scope of different technologies out there that have come around, you have tape backup, going off-site with that. It's expensive, not so much from a capital expense, but from operational expenses. It's very expensive and subject to error, and it's slow. Cloud backup, a little more expensive, but faster, more reliable. Appliance backup, this is where the SMB market, SMBs being 500 employees or less, really start to reach the end of their budgetary restraint, right? Good recovery time, but expensive, additional hardware. Cold site,
hey, Derek,
yeah.
I don't think the slides are advancing. Check real quick.
And are you seeing Drash Nirvana?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Still.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me walk back through that. So we have off-site tape backup, cloud backup, appliance backup, and again, it's cost increasing from left to right and your recovery time decreasing bottom to top. So ideally, we're in the top left. That's cheap and fast, but pretty much all the technology that's come out, it gets more expensive the faster it gets. And then with warm site DR or hot site DR, like what Martin mentioned earlier, you're really not going to be able to afford these systems unless you're already calculating downtime in terms of seconds. I think the latest I saw was of 2015. Amazon calculates their downtime in, I think it's maybe $300,000 or $400,000 every minute. So their outage yesterday was quite costly for them. But what we've done by leveraging the cloud is we've created a service that gives you near like real-time failover. It's not going to automatically identify down machines and boot up a new one, but it's close enough where you can say, wow, we have a failover solution and it's costing less than our tape backup solution did. And it's hard to ignore that type of change, which again, one of the major reasons Gartner recognizes this as a leading visionary. Some of the other trade-offs are what you can actually protect. Most systems are built to handle centralized points of data because it's easier, right? You know where it is, it's on site, it's on the same network all the time, and you can manage that. And it's the remote branches and offices and endpoints that are left exposed. Well, because ransomware enters through all your endpoints and your remote branches, that's not a good solution. And it wasn't a good solution before ransomware, simply because it's estimated that about 60% of a business's data does not reside on central servers, despite the best setup and intentions. Users find a way not to follow the rules, and it's just because they're busy trying to get their work done, and it is what it is. With InfraScale, you have an end-to-end solution: disaster recovery for your critical systems, and you have cloud backup for all the points that don't need to be critically cloud booted into our cloud, but you'd be able to get the data back. Or if you wanted to, you could have certain VIPs and have their desktops ready to be cloud booted, and then you just give them an empty shell of a machine with an operating system, and they can remote in and continue working on their machine until you've recovered everything to a new laptop. That can often cause a full day of downtime for an individual employee, and maybe it's worth it. That's something you can talk about with Triangulum. The other big thing is having to trade off what you can recover from. Micro or macro disasters. Can you easily recover a lost email for somebody? An occurrence that happens all too often. How does your licensing change if you need to do that? Does it change at all? Ours doesn't. You either right-click and you boot the machine in the cloud, or you right-click and explore, and you find what files you want, and then you push them back down to the machine. You can restore machines as new virtual machines to an existing virtual host if you're in a virtual environment, or to a new host. We really give you the flexibility to do what you need to do based on what's happened and how your business works. And again, the recovery plan will be something that'll be well defined and tested after the implementation is done, and everyone will know that it works, and then it'll be continually tested, as Martin has said. So at the end of it all, what does the new experience look like when one of your critical systems goes down? You have Mr. End User. He's working on, he has email, file server access, and he's making commitments to or changes to customer database or ERP system, and all of a sudden he keeps getting errors. He can't do anything. Tech gets involved. They don't have to go on site. They just go to a web interface, and they look at the machine, and they say, okay, this one's down. Right-click, boot. They select the date that they want to boot to, or which version, and they can see it running in the cloud and access it directly, and then they can determine, okay, this one's ready to reconnect to a user. And then they reconnect the users to run through the machine now running in the cloud that didn't recover, and now the downtime ticker stopped. So your business is running business as usual at this point. And that's important because in none of those steps was there, okay, where's the hardware that we can recover to? Can we set up hardware? All of those steps go away when you use a cloud leveraged disaster recovery service. And it makes recovery very easy. It makes testing even easier. one of the examples we have here is one of the systems analysts for the University of Virginia. They were hit by ransomware this last August, and they got the Infrascale DR system set up in, I believe, June. About a month before, the University of Calgary was hit with ransomware, and they had a traditional backup system that was just running fulls on the weekend, incrementals throughout the week to a network location. Their users got hit with ransomware as well as their servers, and they weren't able to recover enough data to avoid paying out the ransom because their backups simply weren't covering enough. They ended up paying $10,000 in ransom, which is not so bad. And I say not so bad because in comparison, they were down for 10 days. That department was just out. If it wasn't for the fact that they were a university, they'd probably be out of business. That's a lot of downtime. So Ellen saw that happen, got Infrascale set up in place. One day, one of her users got hit by a phishing technique that impersonated an in-office copier scanner. So when you scan a document and send a PDF, it got sent from an email address from somebody in the office to another user. So they opened it up thinking this is normal, and then ransomware. And all the users got hit. She was able to just wipe all the users and then just recover back to them all. And she said that of the hour and a half that they were down, about 30 minutes of it was waiting for a thumbs up from the dean to say, go ahead and do it. So she says next time it comes around, again, next time it comes around, she's just as comfortable as she was before. And she said she didn't even break a sweat in this because even though she only had the system for a few months before they got hit, she was able to do a full test twice. So she started doing a monthly test just because of how easy it was and how awesome it was to show. And that'll pretty much bring us to the end. Again, would you like some more information? Hopefully you found this informative. You know, it's not, when you're operating a business, it's not your responsibility, nor should it be, to become an expert on ransomware. And that's why you come to companies like Triangulum. You know, they're gonna bring all that expertise to the table and make sure that you're set up and that you don't have to spend any time worrying about it, and that you don't have to sleep uneasy wondering if you're prepared.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Derek. That's our goal, is to make sure that you have the systems in place for your company. And our dashboard, the way we work our systems too, is we allow the customers to have as much or as little involvement as they want. They can have it all completely managed, or it can be co-managed. We have quite a bit of flexibility there around intelligence, because some people like to manage their environment, and we're completely respectful of that. But there may be some gaps in skill sets on certain applications where our team can come in off the bench and offset and, again, play gap fill on those skill sets that may be missing on some of the smaller teams. So we're here to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Another reason we're happy to be working with Martin and his team. Great group, great business model. All right, so we got the number on the screen, and we'll take some questions now. I got a couple questions already. First one, will the slides be available? We're gonna send out a recording, so you'll be able to see the recording. If you want the slides, you can get in contact with Martin and his team, and they can get you a copy if you like. Got another question. Does this cover Linux as well? Yes, absolutely. So Linux, all the most popular flavors, you know, Symbian, CentOS, all that fun stuff. James says, have to go, cannot accept a visa. Okay. All right, James, understood. We'll make sure that we won't send the visa. If you want to send us an email for somebody else to get it, go for it. Like, I'm sure that's against the rules for you as well. No ADs. All right, question, so Linux, yes, absolutely. Do you support virtual machines? Yes, VMware and Hyper-V both. have an agentless integration. So what you do is when you set up, you connect to the host, and then it'll populate in our system all the machines that are running. And then you can either have automatically all machines added with a basic backup schedule and set, or you can just do a few of them. All right, I got another question about recovery. If I have 3 different machines that run and they have dependencies on each other, is there anything that you can do to make sure that that's not screwed up? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that'll be part of the evaluation that Martin and he does with your team when they're looking through your systems. We have another function called boot orchestration where we can actually predetermine boot groups. So whether that's boot order or ways to recover, and that saves a lot of time. So if you have, virtual environments can get really big really quickly, right? The virtual machines are typically very small, but because of how easy it is, you may have 50, whereas in a physical-only environment, maybe you have 3 physical servers with multiple roles each. And the boot orchestration really helps speed up the process of recovery so that you don't have to one by one right-click and boot. You just hit go boot, go boot orchestration go, and then you can work from there to reconnect your users. I think that answers your question. I think you'd be, it seems like you have some very specific questions about your environment. I'd recommend getting in contact with Martin and his team. All right. If any of you would like to get a call, feel free to enter your number and then the time that you're available, and we can reach out to you. You don't have to call us, not a problem.
I want to throw in there real quick, Derek, something just brought up a moment ago. There's the question about the boot orchestration. That's part of what we do is we come into an environment, and many of my customers, they go through this process and go through the assessment, if you will, kind of that pre-planning stage. A lot of my customers really don't have it well defined what their tiered applications are, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or what their SLAs are. And that's part of what we do when we come in is we try to have an understanding of what the critical applications are and what are the SLAs, what are the realistic expectations for the downtime for those applications. Is it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks? And then once we identify those SLAs and the different application tiers, then we can identify if it's more suited for disaster recovery as a service or backup as a service. And then we can create those boot orders, whether it be because of application dependencies, like you mentioned a moment ago, whether it's because there are certain applications that are more critical than others, and we help you build that out, and that goes into the disaster recovery plan. So it's baked into so you can recover the business the way you need to.
All right, I have another question that I'll comment on, and then I'll let Martin finish up with. But Ted's asking, is there a total cost of ownership for the DRaaS platform? Yeah, I mean, the total cost of ownership is, the TCO is typically calculated as, your capital expenses as far as what you pay for the service or the hardware, whatever goes into that, as well as the time spent managing and monitoring and making sure everything's working in perfect order. Our system, we really wanted to simplify the experience in disaster recovery purchasing. If you look at a lot of companies out there, a lot of them are hardware-based, and you'll spend days just filtering through the pages and pages of different hardware configurations you have. With our system, we can deliver as a virtual appliance if you have your own hardware. We'll send you the specs that you can match. Or for your convenience, and it's the system that we test on, so it's always recommended, you can use one of our appliances, and you don't have to buy it outright. It can just it's just part of the service cost, and that's all based on how much data you have. And then as far as the managing and monitoring, that's where Martin's team comes in, and that's where Martin can take it from there.
That piece is real simple as well. One of the things that I like about Infrascale is the license is based on capacity. So the more data you want to recover from, whether it be disaster recovery or business continuity as a service, or disaster recovery or backup as a service, it's just based on capacity. So the more data you have, if you have 100 terabytes, then the pricing is X. If it's 50 terabytes, it's X divided by 2, essentially, for the simple math of it. And everything comes with it, whether you buy A or B. Again, just real simple, straightforward. And we come in, we take a look at all that. If there's a deduplication or compression, we take advantage of to reduce the footprint in the cloud, but we use those tools as well. So the goal, again, is to create a plan that's not hugely expensive, and it's something that Derek touched on earlier, that is really core to Triangle as a company. Is our goal is to take enterprise class solutions and to bring them down to that SMB mid-market space, where typically the smaller companies just haven't been able to afford this. Well, with the cloud being a lot more ubiquitous now and everybody using it, the prices have really come down a lot. So it is a lot more affordable. It's a phenomenal solution. You definitely get an enterprise class solution out of it at a cost that is not enterprise cost, not like it used to be.
All right, great. We're at the hour mark, so I think this is a good time to announce our winner. So I put in a bunch of names into a bucket. Let me hold on a second. Okay. This is seriously the most generic name I've ever pulled out of a bucket. I'm not making it up. John Smith. John Smith, not here. Okay, probably a reason he's not here. Okay, next one. All right. All right, you're gonna have to forgive me for me pronouncing this. You probably know who you are. Ola Dehindi. Is that right? Did I get that right? Ola Dehindi, I see you're here. Idawu. I apologize if I just butchered your name. I'm all the best intents here. Ola Dehindi, we'll get in, give us your number so we can get in contact and get shipping. So congratulations on your new Amazon Echo. I hope you have fun with Alexa. Here's a little clap for you.
Woohoo!
Yeah, we're all excited. I think I pumped myself up to get my own Alexa. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, we have a couple more quick questions, and then I got to get going. We'll take one last one. Okay, there is question about cost. Oh, good. Okay, here's one about archiving. Can this service also serve as an archive? I actually have a really good answer for you that's in two parts. The first part is yes, you can. There is an archive drive location in the appliance that we deliver, and you can actually pull that drive and then put that into a safety deposit box or a fireproof safe or whatever you want. So you can do it that way. One of the other benefits that we actually didn't hit on today is that we operate our replication quite differently because we're a true cloud backup company. So a lot of times when you have a DR system where it's appliance replication off-site, what's happening is they're actually setting up just a second identical appliance in some other location and replicating, which means that you only have as much capacity at the replication site as you have on your primary. And what they also do is they lock you into having to, whatever's on your primary has to be on the secondary. We're different in both of those senses where, one, it's not just an identical appliance off-site, which is what allows us to allow you to cloud boot as many machines as you want at the same time. And we're not charging you for it. We built out this cloud infrastructure specifically for this purpose. You wouldn't be able to boot all your machines on any appliance-based backup system that you have because it's also running the backup system. But when we leverage the cloud, we can separate that. So you can have your whole network running in the cloud while you're working on a production recovery. The other thing, which comes back to the archival, is that you don't have to keep everything that you're replicating off-site on your primary. You can say, I want to replicate this off-site, and on my on-site appliance, I only want to keep the last 10 days, 30 days, whatever you feel comfortable with. But then off-site, I want to keep it all the time. And you can do that. So and we call this cloud spillover. So good question. That's a good question to end on, I think. Martin, anything to add on that?
Nope. Sounds good to me.
All right. Awesome. Okay, well, we want to thank you all for coming. And again, in the next week or so, you will be getting your, except for James, who cannot accept gifts, you'll all be receiving a $10 Visa gift card via email. And Mr. Ola Dehindi. God, I really wish I could hear you say your name so I can say it properly. You're going to be getting Amazon Echo, so congratulations, good sir. We'll be in contact.
Excellent.
All right, everybody. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.